Well, we are finishing up our 3-week message series today called Love Thy Neighbor. Last week we talked about why we should take Jesus literally. When he says love your neighbor, we shouldn't try to twist his words to mean something different. No, he literally means literally love your literal neighbor. And so when Jesus uses that word neighbor, he means neighbors. He means the people that are near to us. So who are the people near you? I hope you've given some thought to that over the last week. Who are the neighbors on your street? Who are your neighbors at work? Who are the people near to you in your class, near to you on your routes to work or your route that you drive to school or to play? Today I want to give you some very practical ideas on how to love those people that you've identified as your neighbor, how to love those neighbors better, how to love those people near us, especially those literal neighbors on your street. And because I'm going to give you some ideas that hopefully are practical and your ideas, these are ideas that you'll want to put into place. Hopefully they will be good ideas for you. So I want to invite you, even if you don't ever do this, to try to take some notes today. Take some notes in the Bible app, jot them down in your Bible if you scrap of paper, a napkin, whatever, something to help you to remember to try some of these ideas that we're going to talk about, since we're talking about some very practical things today. So because the ideas that we leave here today, not with just this great love of the idea of loving our neighbors, but we have love for our actual neighbors, and we have some practical application of how to do that. So the goal here today is to leave empowered and equipped to actually love our neighbors better. Because if this is really the most important commandment in all of the Bible, that which Jesus says basically this, along with this, the commandment to love God, it's the most important commandment in all of the Bible, then why not do whatever it takes to be obedient to that one important command? I mean, maybe we'll mess up on all the other commands, but if we can get this one right, then maybe that's significant. So let's do our best today. We don't just want to talk the love thy neighbors talk, we want to walk the love thy neighbors walk. So let's walk in obedience to this command together. Let's take this command literally to our streets. So today I want to give you 4 practical steps to walk the walk to love your neighbors. So the first step is to walk your streets. It's to walk your streets. If you want to love your neighbor more, then you've got to walk your streets. Walking your street will help you to slow down and to open your eyes to the neighbors that are right there in front of you. It will help you to get outside for a longer period of time. You know, in our suburban culture, we're so much of a just drive into our garage and close our door behind us before we even get out of the car kind of culture. But if you want to love your neighbors more, you've got to spend a little bit more time outside with them. You got to see them on your streets. So once you start walking your streets, I want you to start prayer walking your streets. Walk down the streets and pray as you walk. You know, pray hopefully with eyes open. Pray with words either aloud or quietly in your heart if you don't want to look like a crazy person walking down the street talking to yourself. You know, talk to God about your neighbors, because the important thing is we don't just see our neighbors and we don't just talk to our neighbors, but we also talk to God about our neighbors. That's another way that we love our neighbors, is to talk to God about them. So prayer walk your streets. If you're terrible at finding time to pray, then this activity will not only help you to love your neighbors more, but it will actually really help to improve your prayer life in the process. So this challenges our prayers not to just be so sporadic and not to just be so me focused. You know, we sometimes we get in a rut, you know, praying for ourselves and the same prayers all the time, the same prayers for our own life. Does anybody else get in a prayer rut every now and then, just praying the same thing? And so think about this challenging question for me. Just think about how you would respond, that if God granted every prayer that you prayed this morning, if God granted that request, every prayer, every single one of them, God said yes, then how would the world be different today? Does that challenge you? Right? I mean, maybe, unfortunately, nothing at all would change because you didn't utter one word to God this morning. You just didn't get a chance to pray. You know, or maybe you did pray, but so maybe your life would be really great, but no one else's life would be impacted by your prayers. And so if you would prayer walk your neighborhood, if God granted all those prayers, your entire neighborhood would be changed and would be different. So if you actually love your neighbor better, if you actually want to love your neighbor better, then take this step with us to walk your streets. This is the first step to take. Make this a regular habit. You know, maybe do this once a week. Write it into your calendar as an opportunity. This is the time that I'm going to prayer walk my streets this week. Another activity enhance that activity is to make a map of your street, or you print out a map of your street and write on that map the names of your neighbors, and then pray for those neighbors when you're not walking the streets, right? You can keep that near your Bible, near your prayer journal, so that you can pray for the names of those neighbors on your street. As you learn of their needs, you can write those needs down on the map as well. So, and then take this even one step further, you could make other maps as well. Like you could map out your coworkers' offices and prayer walk your office. You could map out the roads that you drive and your driving routes to work or to work out or to the grocery store, wherever you find yourself driving a lot. Then map out that route and write the names of the neighbors that you see along the way. So prayer walking regularly, that's the first step to loving your neighbors. The second step is number 2, lean into the awkwardness. So lean into the awkwardness. So we're going to walk and then we're going to lean, okay? So loving our neighbors is going to create some awkwardness in your life. It just is, right? And I want you to lean into that because that is okay. Here are a few ways that your life may become a little bit awkward if you actually try to love your neighbors. The first is that you may have to confess to that neighbor that you've talked to every single yard day for the last 13 years that you've lived in that neighborhood, that you've forgotten his name, that you never took the time to actually learn that person's name. And maybe you're going to have to confess that and say, hey, would you just tell me your name because I've forgotten it and I'm a terrible neighbor. And that might be a really awkward conversation for you to have. Now, secondly, loving your neighbor usually involves inviting people to stuff. And lots of times those people that you invite, what you'll find is that they tell you that they're going to come. And then they don't come. And that's really awkward because then, like, you see them, you invited them to this thing, and you see them, like, outside in their yard not coming to that thing that you invited them to, that they said they were going to come. That's really awkward. I mean, it's happened to me a lot. You take the time to grill the burgers or to clean your house or to make the invitations or whatever it is that you took the time to do, and then people don't show up. And that's just a little awkward because these are the same people you're going to run into every day, as you come home. But you know what? If the first century followers of Jesus, if Jesus' first disciples could stand up to persecution, then we can lean into a little awkwardness. Okay, I think we can just lean in to that awkwardness. Third, just the fact that you're trying to love your neighbor, just that fact, that's going to make you a little weird. Because normal people don't try to love their neighbors. Normal people don't try to be a better neighbor. They don't try to forge community in their neighborhood or at the office. And so that sort of thing just is going to make you a little bit weird compared to other people. Normal people, really, if you think about it, normal people don't love people. Normal people have just written off other people. Normal people don't love their neighbors. Only weird followers of Jesus actually do that. So be different, because normal is broken. Because normal people, they still need to be loved even if they're not loving themselves. If you're going to actually love your neighbors, you need to be ready to be weird. You need to lean into that awkwardness. Now, I read this great article from the Babylon Bee, which is, you may know that, it's a satirical online news magazine. It's sort of like The Onion, only directed primarily at Christian subculture. And so there's this great article that was entitled, "Success. This Christian is now completely indistinguishable from the culture he's trying to reach." The article reads, "Finally, after many years of trying to reach the godless culture for Christ by immersing himself in it completely, local Christian man Winston Lawrence is now 100% indistinguishable from the world. Go Winston!" The man watches all the same shows his neighbors and coworkers do, so they won't think he's weird. He dresses like them, talks like them, and acts like them. In fact, whenever they bring up topics related to God or religion, he laughs mockingly and says things like, "Yeah, those Christians are such weirdos." And, "God? What is this, the Dark Ages?" I mean, can you imagine if my boss started talking about the Game of Thrones and I was like, "What's the Game of Thrones? Mother of Dragons? Who's that?" He told reporters. What a disaster that would be. I have to be completely covert, blending in like a master ninja if I'm going to show these people how great and glorious the gospel is. Winston says critics are too quick to dismiss his methods of becoming exactly like the world to reach the world. "Sure, I'm now pretty much living just like a pagan," he said. "But just you wait. In 30 or 40 years, I'll reveal that I'm a Christian, and everybody will be like, 'What? No way. You're too cool to be a Christian.' And they'll all come running to Jesus." Now, why is that at all humorous? Because this is how normal followers of Jesus live their lives. Right? They're just like everybody else. And we think that others will run from Jesus if they perceive us to just be a little bit awkward or a little bit weird or a little bit different. And we expect people to run to Jesus when we are totally and completely the same as them in every way. But as a Jesus follower, you must be different. You must lean in to the awkwardness. And if you really, really try to do this love your neighbor stuff, you're going to be different than even other followers of Jesus are. Because not every follower of Jesus gets out of their house and gets out of their routine and gets out of their comfort and gets out of the boat in order to love their neighbors. And the perfect example of that is the Apostle Peter, right, in Matthew chapter 14. In this passage of Scripture, in Matthew chapter 14, Jesus walks on water. And he's walking on a lake toward a boat with a few of his disciples in it. And we pick up that story in Matthew chapter 14, starting in verse 28, if you want to follow along there. Matthew chapter 14, verse 28. It says, "Then Peter called to Jesus, 'Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come to you walking on the water.' 'Yes, come,' Jesus said. So Peter went over to the side of the boat and walked on the water toward Jesus. But when he saw the strong wind and the waves, he was terrified and began to sink. 'Save me, Lord,' he shouted." Okay, so what's interesting to me about this story is that Peter is the only disciple who gets out of the boat. And he's actually doing it. He's actually walking on water. I mean, it's miraculous. It's amazing. It's incredible. But then he gets himself into trouble when he takes his eyes off of Jesus and starts looking around. Basically, Matthew tells us that he's looking around. He looks at the wind and the waves. And so he takes his focus off of Jesus and he looks around. And I wonder if he saw more than just the wind and the waves when he took his eyes off Jesus. I wonder if he also happened to look back behind him. And I wonder if Peter looked back at the boat. And more importantly, I wonder if Peter looked back at the other followers of Jesus who were still in the boat. And yeah, the wind and the waves were scary, but I wonder if the reason that the wind and the waves are what scared him, what made him sink, is because he looked back at those other followers of Jesus who had not taken the risk. And he started to think to himself, wait a minute, who am I to think that I can do this when none of them are taking the risk to do this? Who am I to take this risk when no one else is taking the same risk? Why did I decide to go to a church where they're constantly challenging me to get out and to love my neighbor when I could have just picked another church where I could just sit in the comfort of my chair or my sofa at home and nothing had to change? Friends, Grassroots is a church of people that is trying to walk on water. Not a church who's trying to just take a relaxing sail at sea. All of us are trying to get out of the boat and onto the waves of the sea, which can be a little scary sometimes when we're not just hanging out on board expecting other people to do that for us. So I want to challenge you to lean into that awkwardness, lean into that scariness, lean into that discomfort, lean into the risk, and step out in faith. Speaking of stepping out, the third step to walk the walk of loving your neighbors is to step out of your circle. Step out of your circle. So everyone has a circle, right? Some people's circles are bigger than others, but everyone has some sort of circle. Now, what I mean by a circle is that you all have people, right? If you're going to do something, you're going to do something with that same circle of friends, probably, those same people. So if you're going to throw a party, you're going to invite your whole circle. If you're going to go out to lunch, you might just invite someone from your circle. So who's your circle? If you actually love your neighbors, if you want to love them more, then you've got to step out of that circle. You've got to open up your life to friendships with more people. Don't get stuck in these ruts. Don't always do everything with the same circle of friends. Let some new people into your circle. Get out of your bubbles. Jesus says in Luke chapter 14, verse 12, then he turned to his host. When you put on a luncheon or a banquet, he said, don't invite your friends, brothers, relatives, and rich neighbors, for they will invite you back, and that will be your only reward. In other words, that lunch it'll just go in a big circle. You'll just keep having lunch with each other. Instead, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind. Invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind. Then, at the resurrection of the righteous, God will reward you for inviting those who could not repay you. So invite the people outside of your bubble. And in Luke chapter 6, verse 32, Jesus also says, he says, if you love only those who love you, why should you get credit for that? Even sinners love those who love them, he says. And if you do good only to those who do good to you, why should you get credit? Even sinners do that much. So step out of that circle. Invite someone into your existing circle or create a new circle, friends, but don't get trapped in your bubble. Now, the objection is usually, I feel like I have enough friends or I have enough to do. And I get that. And this, I think, is a real problem in our church in particular. We are such a family church, and there are many of us here that are literally family, and there's other people that are family of family, so they're not from the family tree, but the branches of the family trees are all like interconnected up there, And so the reality is that I could, if I just only ever did things with my own personal family every single week, I would still have a slamming social calendar, right? I would always have something to do if I just stuck to my family circle. So the reality is that maybe you don't feel like you need any more friends either. Maybe you don't feel like you need anything else to do either. But you still need to step out of that circle, because there are people on the outside of that circle that need you. Even though you feel like you don't need them, they need you. People need you in their life, and people need God in their life, and God uses you to bring them to Him. So I get that you don't feel like having any more friends, but are you really going to let your satisfaction of, having enough friends maybe be the reason that someone else never gets invited into God's circle? Are you really so comfortable in your own bubble that you're also comfortable with being the reason that someone goes to hell? I mean, who is on the outside of your circle, whose life out there right now, as we speak, apart from God, is like living in a living hell? Because no one reaches out to them, and no one ever invites them. No one ever includes them. No one ever shows them that they're loved or takes the time to invite them. That got heavy kind of really quick, didn't it? We don't usually talk about hell like that. But we have a responsibility to step out of that circle and to invite others into the kingdom of heaven. And so the next time you plan something, whether it's just a meal or an event or a trip or a movie or whatever, just step out of your circle. Even if it's just the next time you just go to lunch with someone, maybe just pick one different friend to go to lunch with. Even Nikki and I try to teach this to our kids at their school, because it's so often, and maybe you remember being as a kid at school, and you would sit in the lunchroom in the same spot with the same people at the same table every single day. And we say it's okay to sit with different people at the lunchroom table. Sharing a meal together, is a natural way to expand our friendships, to forge friendships, to break down barriers between each other. So if you want to expand your circle or start a new circle, maybe the way to do that is around a table. Sitting around a table with new people. We've talked before about this idea of tithing your meals. Tithing your meals. Now, tithing, when we normally talk about tithing, we're talking about money. Tithing means giving 10% away. So, and it usually refers to our money, like this tithe challenge that we've been doing through the summer. The tithe challenge is where we're challenging you to take a look at what is 10% of my income, and then giving away that 10% of your income to God's kingdom. So we are such strong believers in this idea of tithing, of giving away 10%, that this tithe challenge is about us giving you kind of like a tongue-in-cheek kind of money-back guarantee. It's a money-back guarantee that if you give away 10% of your income and then you starve to death, or things go really bad for you in some way, and God doesn't just bless you in the process of you doing that, then we'll just gladly refund your money. You can have it back. Because the deal is that tithing is not about our church receiving the money. It's about our church learning to be blessed by giving money to God's kingdom. And so this idea of tithing, we've extended it to tithing our meals as well. So a tithe is 10%. So when we tithe our meals, that means that we have 21 meals a week. So that means we're going to give away 2.1 meals per week 2.1. So that means 2.1 meals a week. We're going to have a meal with someone outside of our circle. We're going to go to lunch. We're going to bring someone breakfast. We're going to invite someone to dinner. We're going to have a cup of coffee. Maybe that's your 0.1 meal a week or something. We're going to have a cup of coffee with someone. So we're going to step out of our circle as we learn to love our neighbors in that way, as we tithe our meals. You can even take that step today at lunch. And you can invite someone here to lunch with you. And the good thing is no one's going to think you're weird or awkward for doing that, because they just listened to the same message that they did and that you did, and they're going to plan to lean into that awkwardness as well and invite people to lunch as well. So tithe your meals. Write down when those meals would be for you. When it would be convenient for you to do that sort of thing. Look at your calendar, write some ideas, and step out of your circle. And the fourth step to walk the walk of loving your neighbors is, number 4, is a standing invitation. A standing invitation. So the thing about loving our neighbors, and we've said this in the other 3 weeks of this message series over and over, we said that this concept of loving our neighbors is important. It's the most important command in all of the Bible. It's not just one thing that Christians do. It undergirds everything that we do as Christians. It's not even just something that we do, it's who we are. It's a part of who we are, that we are people who love our neighbors. And so if we really want to love our neighbors, if we really want to make it a part of who we are, then it's got to become a part of the rhythm of our lives. An important part of that important commandment is this act of invitation. Because the gospel is about God inviting people into a relationship with him and inviting people into his kingdom. So if we're going to love our neighbors, then we have to invite them into our lives, invite them into our schedules, invite them into our prayers, invite them into our church. So we talk a lot about invitation, inviting people even to worship here on Sundays. My son Levi recently, when we posted our last My Mission Monday video, actually Lainey posted that for us. She did that video for us, my daughter Lainey. And My Mission Monday challenge of the week was to invite a family member to church with you. And Levi asked me after that video was done being recorded, he said, why is it always the same thing? Just invite someone to church, invite someone to church. I said, first of all, it's not always the same thing. It's not always invite someone to church. But secondly, it's because we believe that invitation is important. That we want to invite people to have the opportunity to receive a new and a better life. And then even beyond that, thirdly, we want to challenge people often to this because we need it to become a part of the rhythm of our lives. And so hopefully even just if it's a monthly rhythm of inviting someone to church or inviting someone to be a part of our lives, then that becomes a part of who we are. So it's like we become a people who live and breathe loving invitation. Not just an invitation, of course, to Sunday worship, but an invitation to friendship, an invitation to a meal, an invitation to be blessed, an invitation to be encouraged, an invitation to be prayed for, an invitation to witness the Jesus life, an invitation to a better life with Jesus. And our lives need to be marked by that constant and consistent invitation. So I want to challenge you to create a standing invitation of some kind. A standing invitation to your neighbors. Now, there are a lot of ways that we can do this, but of course, an easy way that we've already talked about to invite people to have a standing invitation is around the table, is around food. In our culture, food just naturally breaks down barriers and forges friendships. So find a consistent night of the week or day of the week or time of each month to begin serving some food to your neighbors and give a constant standing invitation to your neighborhood. Make it a predictable pattern, something that people can expect on a weekly or monthly or whatever basis, whatever pattern you choose. One pattern my mom is trying out is this Super Sunday Lunches idea, where she can make a couple of crock pots of soup before she leaves for church on Sunday, and then as she goes home, she can have people, her neighborhood, over for lunch. And there's no agenda, she just opens her home up to any friends or any neighbors that want to come. And there's no agenda, there's no Bible study, anything like that. It's just an open door and hospitable home. It's a standing invitation, though. People can come to expect. It's a predictable pattern, and it's a constant reminder to people that they are welcome at your home. So I recently heard this story on the radio, I don't know if you heard it too, about this family that built a table and they put it in their front yard. So they had this table out in their front yard, and they gave a standing invitation to dinner outside in their front yard to their neighbors. And the table's constant presence out front that never moved was a constant reminder to their neighbors that you are welcome here. You're welcome at our home. You're welcome around this table to be in a relationship with us. And I just thought that was so awesome. I love that. I really want somebody who's good at building things to build me an awesome table. And I can't probably put it in my front yard because of HOA, but maybe I could put it in my garage, and I could redo my garage and make it really nice and not an ugly garage. And so every time I roll up my door, people can see that table and they can be invited to come and to eat with us. So what will your standing invitation be to your neighbors? Maybe you decide to grill burgers every Monday night and you watch Monday Night Football together out in your man cave. Or maybe you forgo the whole food thing because you're not good at the food, but you have a really awesome 4K OLED or whatever TV, and you want to invite people to come over and watch Monday Night Football there. That's cool. It doesn't matter what the standing invitation is for you. I don't know what you're passionate about. I don't know what would be best for you, but it just matters that you do this, that you have an open invitation to your neighbors in some way. Because loving our neighbors isn't just something that we do, it's who we are. And it's got to become a part of the rhythm of our lives. It's got to become like breathing to us, as natural and as constant as breathing. Loving invitation is like inhaling and exhaling for us. So that's our encouragement, is to walk and to lean and to step out and to stand with us as we walk the walk of loving our neighbors. So let me pray for us today. God, thank you for this incredible love that you have for us. Help us to live like you love. Help us to not just to love the idea of loving our neighbors, but God, help us to put that love into practice. Help us to take practical steps towards walking the walk of loving our neighbors. God, move us and push us and challenge us and walk with us as we journey on this journey of loving God and loving our neighbor. God, as we prepare to receive communion today, just remind us of the incredible love you have for us, the love that caused you to move into the neighborhood with humanity. So God, may the bread that we eat today remind us of your broken body, and may this juice remind us of the blood that you shed for us on the cross as you died to take the penalty of our sin away. Holy Spirit, come and join us at this meal. Fill this bread and juice so that as we eat this bread and juice, as we dip this bread in the juice and eat it, then fill it so that we wouldn't just be filled with bread and juice in our bodies, but our bodies, our souls would be filled with the very spirit of our loving God. Fill us with your love that overflows to love for our neighbors. And as we leave this place, just empower us to put that love into action. In Jesus' name.